Well, good evening. Thank you for being here. To give witness about how I got here, I have to go back to the moment when God called my name. I have the blessing to say that I received Jesus in my heart when I was a child. But for that to happen, I needed someone to introduce me to him. That someone were my maternal grandparents. Even though I grew up knowing that God exists and that he's the creator of everything, I did not have a personal relationship with him. He just was a distant God. I remember with such clarity the first time I went with my grandparents to their church. I could feel God's presence immediately. Back then, my parents were not practicing their faith in God. Like many people in my country of Mexico, they were just followers of Catholic traditions without a deep intimacy with the Lord. For some time, my dad allowed me, my siblings and I, to attend church with my grandparents, but later on, my dad didn't let us keep going with them, but the seed was already planted. My grandparents live across the street from us, so we used to visit them often, and I remember listening to sermons and worship music at their house. My grandfather was a very wise man and a true student of the Bible. I learned a lot without going to church. I can say with all sincerity that since I was little, I always felt special to God. In spite of all the years living with boundaries, God was always present in all the details of my life. When I turned 18, I found the courage to speak with my dad about my deep desire to attend the same church as my grandparents. He was mad. He didn't speak to me for days, but he allowed me to go. From that moment on, I started to grow even more in my spiritual life. I had the chance to serve in Sunday school and participate more in all activities. My involvement in the church helped me to go through the tough years of college. The majority of my friends used to look for fun in unhealthy ways, but I always felt that God was setting me apart for a greater plan, something that was beyond my understanding. My love for him helped me to fight through the rejection for not being like the rest. When I was a young adult, one of my cousins taught me to pray for my future husband. She told me to make a detailed list of what I wanted in my husband, and I did it. And I prayed for him long before I met him. After finishing college, I applied for several jobs, and the first one to offer me a position was Princess Cruises. Through this job, the Lord answered many of my most fervent prayers. Anyone that knows me knows my passion for traveling, and what better way to do it than on the Love Boat, where God introduced me to the love of my life. The funny thing is that back then, I was so crazy about him that I didn't even bother to ask him about his faith. Eventually, it became known in a conversation that his parents were pastors for the Salvation Army. And that is how I was introduced to this amazing organization. It always amazes me how God had everything perfectly orchestrated. He was in all the details, even when we were not in the best moments of our lives, spiritually speaking. Our stories were woven together before we even knew it. If someone had asked me 10 years ago or 5 years ago if I had given a thought to officership, I would have laughed. Not only was it not in our plans, but that was something to run from. But as it is written, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. I believe our calling breaks the mold a little. Even though we love God and he has always been the head of our family, we didn't grow up to study with the desire of being ministers. Nevertheless, we have learned to be obedient, and without a shadow of a doubt, we know that the Lord has spoken. And it is our duty to trust and obey. Our fear of the unknown has become a passion to take the gospel to the nations. And with that same trust we go, knowing that the Lord goes before us, and there's no greater blessing than to do his will. Thank you, and God bless you.